With Alan's introduction fresh in the team's mind, Louise proceeds to explain the format of the daily Scrum to the team. Before we get started, I'd like to direct your attention to the board that Alan and I added to the wall yesterday after our sprint planning session. This board represents our sprint backlog, and it's how we'll track our progress throughout the sprint. I've added a column to represent each state that an item progresses through before we deliver it to the organization. The first column is To Do, which represents items that we've yet to begin. The next is In Progress, which represents items that are actively being worked on. And the next column is Testing, which of course represents items that are either waiting to be tested or are currently being tested. And the last column is Done, which represents items that we've completed. In addition, we've also added a sticky note to represent each item that was selected for the sprint in yesterday's sprint planning session. You'll also notice that I've added push pins with each of your names on them to the right side of the board. When you're working on an item, simply use your push pin to hold the corresponding card to the board. This will help us better understand what state an item is in. So, for example, if Josh picks up an item, then he'll move it to the In Progress column and use his push pin to hold it to the board. This will tell the rest of the team that Josh is currently working with this item. Once he's finished writing the code for that item, he'll move it to the Testing column. Peter, you can then pick up that item by placing your push pin on it, signaling to the rest of the team that you are now working on testing the item. Not only does this clearly communicate who is currently responsible for an item, but it also helps discourage multitasking. Each of us can only effectively work on one item at a time, so each of us only has one push pin to represent that. If you're working on one item and you need to pick up a second, then you must remove your push pin from the first item and move it to the second item. You should then put the first item back into the To-Do column at the top, signaling that someone else may pick that item up. Don't worry, there are plenty of unlabeled push pins to hold items to the board when no one else is actively working on them. Peter, there's only one of you, but we have 2 members of our team writing code, so you'll probably be in high demand. This means that we'll likely see quite a few items in test at any given moment with unlabeled push pins while Peter is working on testing another item. This is when I'd like to remind you that you're a cross-functional development team and what that means. While some of you may specialize in skills such as testing, coding, or architecture, at the end of the day, you're all on the development team and you're all ultimately accountable for delivering a product increment at the end of this sprint. If you finish an item and notice that there are items in the testing column that aren't actively being worked on, take the opportunity to see if there's any way that you can help test them to keep the flow moving. Peter will probably need to be the final tester on any item, but a lot of items would benefit from at least an initial rough pass by another member of the development team while Peter is busy working on others. Not only will this help you move items across the board as quickly as possible, but it will also expose each of you to areas of the product you may not have been exposed to otherwise. Now, let's talk about the format of the Daily Scrum. The Daily Scrum consists of 3 questions that we'll each answer in turn. What did I do yesterday that helped the development team meet the sprint goal? What will I do today to help the development team meet the sprint goal? And do I see any impediment that prevents me or the development team from meeting the sprint goal? Remember that our overall time box for this meeting is 15 minutes, and while we're not being timed individually, a good rule of thumb is that each person should be able to answer these questions in about 2 minutes. While this may seem tight at first, I expect that you'll each be surprised how much time it actually gives you. I also want to call your attention to the last question regarding impediments. This is arguably the most important question in the Daily Scrum because it encourages you to identify anything that may be keeping you from contributing at your full potential. If there's anything that seems to be slowing you down, you should feel completely comfortable bringing it up so we can work as a team to help address it. These may be organizational issues, such as an unexpected commitment to another project, or not having access to the environments that you need. In that case, it's my job as a Scrum Master to work to resolve these issues for you. But you can also use this as a forum to bring up any issues on which you're stuck. These could be a new framework that you need to get experience with, an area of the code base that you know you'll need to change but you haven't worked with before, or just a particularly tough problem that you can't figure out how to solve. More often than not, someone else in the team has already encountered these same issues and can lend a hand to help you solve the problem quickly. Whenever that happens, I would ask any of you who can help solve another teammate's problem to offer your assistance during the daily scrum. But while I will ask you to offer during the daily scrum so we all know that someone is helping, please hold the resulting breakout conversation on how to actually solve the problem until after the daily scrum is over. While we want this meeting to be a forum that enables everyone to work together, we also want to be respectful of everyone's time. Okay everyone, let's give it a try. Priyanka, would you like to start us off? Sure, says Priyanka, looking at Louise. Yesterday, after the sprint planning session, I worked with Josh to evaluate the CSV export library that we discussed yesterday to allow us to export the profit and loss report. Today, we'll begin trying out that library with a few basic exports. Oh, and I have no impediments that I know of. Great, says Louise. Peter, you're next to Priyanka. Can you go next, and we'll just work our way around the room? Okay, says Peter. Yesterday, after the sprint planning session, I started writing the test plans for the CSV export. Today, after I finish those test plans, I'll move on to writing the test plans for the Excel export as well. Since we're discussing impediments, I should say that I'm a bit stuck on this one. We haven't done Excel export in the product before, so I'm a little unclear as to what its capabilities will be. For example, are we just exporting raw values, or will we also be trying to export formulas? And what formatting options should I expect? Will we be taking advantage of any of the rich text or color capabilities in Excel when we export the data, or will we simply be exporting it in plain text? I can answer that, says Josh. I've exported to Excel in the past and have found that while the rich text support is pretty straightforward, we really don't want to get into any more advanced formatting like colors or shading, and we definitely don't want to do formula export. That's really tough. So you can just assume that we're exporting raw values with some basic rich text. Hold on, says Dave. I think our customers really need the formula export if this export is going to be of any use to them at all. And I think that being able to provide some nice color formatting would be a nice differentiator for us against our competitors, since they're simply just exporting Excel in plain text. Just as Josh is about to answer, Louise interrupts. Okay guys, stop. This is obviously something that we need to discuss, but not with the whole team present. The rest of the team will simply need to be aware of whatever decision comes out of that discussion. Dave, Josh, and Peter, can you stick around after the daily scrum to make a decision on exactly what level of Excel export we'll be supporting? Then you can update the rest of the team on that decision at tomorrow's daily scrum. Before the next member of the development team speaks, Alan raises his hand. May I offer a suggestion? I notice that many of you are looking to Louise while contributing to the daily scrum. Remember that this is a planning meeting for the development team, not a status meeting for the Scrum Master. Try to shift your focus from reporting your status to Louise to instead discussing the items that are currently in the sprint backlog. Directing your attention to the Scrum board while you're speaking will help you do this. That's great advice, Alan. Thank you for reminding us, answers Louise. Okay, Josh, it's your turn. Okay. Yesterday, after the sprint planning, I showed the CSV export library that we've used in the past to Priyanka so we can understand if it will fit our needs now. Today, I'll be talking to Dave about that export library right after our daily scrum so he can get a better idea of what its capabilities are. And then I suppose I'll move right into building the core export functionality of the report. Oh, and I don't have any impediments either. After Josh is giving his update, Louise says, Okay guys, that's it. Great job on our first daily scrum. But wait a minute, says Priyanka. You didn't go, and neither did Dave. Great catch, Priyanka, answers Alan. That's actually a key piece of the daily scrum that I forgot to mention. The daily scrum is intended for the development team, so it doesn't necessarily include the Scrum Master or the product owner. Remember that it's your plan that you'll need to be making to move the team closer to the sprint goal. And while each member of the broader Scrum team is accountable for different pieces of the Scrum framework, remember that the piece that the development team is accountable for is delivering the potentially shippable product increment that fulfills that sprint goal. For that reason, it really wouldn't be fair for anyone else on the Scrum team to inject their plans into a goal that the development team is ultimately accountable for.